It was a busy Saturday morning. The supermarket was buzzing with people, kids running, carts squeaking, and the faint smell of fresh bread in the air. She moved slowly, carefully balancing her baby in one arm and a heavy grocery bag in the other. Every few steps, she adjusted the straps on the stroller side and glanced nervously at the checkout line that seemed to stretch forever. No one noticed the slight tremor in her hands. No one saw the worry etched on her face. She tried to smile at her child, but it was a tired smile, one that spoke of sleepless nights and endless responsibilities. She was doing everything she could, but it clearly wasn't enough. Then he appeared, just a man quietly walking down the aisle, observing, blending in with the crowd. But there was something about the way he looked at her, not with judgment, not with pity, but with quiet attentiveness. His gaze lingered for a moment, just enough for her to feel it, though she couldn't tell who he was or why he was watching. She dropped a small jar of sauce. It rolled under the cart. Without thinking, she crouched to pick it up. In that split second, his hand reached out and caught it. Just like that, he stopped it from rolling away. She looked up, startled. "Thank you," she said, her voice almost a whisper, unsure if she should speak to a stranger. He didn't say anything. He just nodded gently, a small, reassuring smile on his face. It was so simple, yet it felt different, somehow safe. Somehow like someone finally noticed, not just the falling jar, but the effort, the exhaustion behind her eyes. She kept moving, trying to steady herself, and he followed at a distance, careful not to make her uncomfortable. But there was no rushing, no push, no intrusion. He simply observed, ready to step in, should she need it. In that moment, she had no idea that the stranger helping her was not just a kind passerby. She had no idea that he carried a life she couldn't even imagine, a life of influence, wealth, and power. He was someone who could change lives, and yet here he was, quietly noticing her struggle, as if it mattered more than anything else in the world. It was a small act of awareness, a moment that felt ordinary, but it wasn't. It was the kind of thing that makes your heart catch, that makes you pause in the middle of a noisy, chaotic world. What would you do if a stranger suddenly helped you like this? Comment below. Would you accept the help or hesitate? The supermarket buzzed with life. The fluorescent lights reflected off the polished tiles, making the aisles look endless. The faint hum of refrigerators and the constant squeak of carts created a low, almost hypnotic rhythm. Shoppers hurried from one section to another, some chatting on their phones, others scanning shelves with practiced efficiency. Children tugged at parents' sleeves, whining for candy or toys. Cashiers rang up groceries at a relentless pace, calling out totals and scanning items with machine-like precision. Amid all this chaos, she moved cautiously. Her arms were full, her shoulders tense. The baby in her arms squirmed slightly, restless but too young to understand why they were moving so slowly. The grocery bag she carried bulged at the seams, straps digging into her palms. She tried to balance everything, adjusting the weight, shifting it from one hand to another, attempting to steady herself as she navigated through the crowd. Every step required calculation, every turn demanded awareness. One wrong move, and the baby might cry, the bag might fall, or the stroller might bump into someone. People passed by without noticing. Some glanced briefly, then looked away. Others were lost in their own worlds, scrolling on their phones, arguing with children, or hurrying to beat the line at checkout. No one saw the sweat on her brow, or the faint tremor in her fingers. No one noticed the tension behind her tired eyes. In a place so full of people, she was invisible. And then he appeared. He wasn't someone who made a grand entrance. There were no dramatic gestures, no flashing lights, no obvious signs of importance. He simply walked down the aisle, moving with quiet confidence, his pace unhurried, yet purposeful. There was something in the way he observed, not in the glances of a passerby, but in the focused attention of someone who notices everything and misses nothing. He wasn't staring in a way that made her uncomfortable. He wasn't intrusive. He was simply there, present, aware. She dropped another item, this time a small carton of eggs. It teetered on the edge of her overloaded cart and nearly fell. Before she could react, he was there, steadying the cart with one hand, his fingers brushing hers briefly as he did. "Careful," he said softly, almost like a whisper carried on the hum of the supermarket. No one else noticed. No one else would have even thought to help. But he did. She looked up at him, startled. "Oh, thank you," she murmured. Her voice was almost drowned out by the ambient noise, but he heard it anyway. His expression remained calm, almost unreadable, but there was a warmth there, subtle, that made her feel seen. And in that moment, that small act, a hand steadying a cart, a gentle word felt like a lifeline. He followed at a respectful distance, allowing her space but staying close enough that she could feel the quiet presence of support. Every movement she made was mirrored subtly. He stepped aside when she turned, waited patiently when she paused to adjust the stroller, and never, ever rushed her. The contrast between his calm composure and the bustling chaos of the store was striking. While everyone else was absorbed in their errands, distracted by phones, lists, or impatience, he was attuned to her reality. The baby yawned and stretched, reaching for her shoulder. She laughed softly, exhausted but trying to stay composed. A carton of milk slipped from the bag she carried, and once again, his hand was there. He picked it up without comment and placed it gently back in the bag, adjusting it so it wouldn't topple over again. The simplicity of the act, no fanfare, no expectation, spoke volumes. In a world where most people were self-absorbed, this stranger was fully present, noticing the struggle that had gone completely unseen until now. She moved toward the checkout line, trying to manage the bags, the stroller, and the baby all at once. Lines stretched longer. The noise crescendoed with the chatter of impatient shoppers. Someone accidentally bumped her cart, and she instinctively braced for another collision. But before it could happen, his hand steadied the stroller again, subtle, almost instinctive. His calm control created a small bubble of order around her in the middle of the chaos. Other shoppers began to notice the quiet interaction, though none could fully comprehend what was happening. A woman glanced over and smiled, thinking it was a simple act of kindness. A man in the next aisle shook his head, unaware that he had just witnessed a moment of careful attention. The mother herself felt a shift, a sense of relief that she hadn't realized she was craving. Someone was aware, someone cared, and yet she had no idea who he was. His face was familiar, but she couldn't place him. There were no clues in his attire or demeanor that suggested anything extraordinary. To her, he was just another person in a crowded store. But to those paying attention, those who noticed the calm authority in his movements, the careful observation in his eyes, he was anything but ordinary. This quiet presence, in a place so full of noise and distraction, created tension in the most subtle way. Every step, every glance, every small intervention hinted at a larger story. It was the kind of suspense that didn't need drama, just observation. And in that observation, a story was already beginning to unfold, one that would change her day, her perspective, and eventually, her understanding of the world around her. Showing the chaos around her vest, his calmness builds emotional contrast. Viewers feel the stress she's under, and the subtle support of the stranger makes it satisfying. She had no idea that the man following her through the store was more than just kind. He carried a life, an influence that could change everything for her, though she couldn't know it yet. The moment she stepped into the checkout lane, a weight seemed to press down harder on her shoulders. The baby in her arms fussed, restless and hungry, tugging at her sweater and letting out little whimpers that pulled at her already frayed patience. Her grocery bags were unsteady, bulging and heavy, each step a careful calculation. Every item threatened to slip or topple, and every bump in the floor sent a jolt through her arms. She tried to take deep breaths, reminding herself that it would all be fine, but the truth was it never felt fine. Not really. She glanced around nervously, hoping no one was watching her struggle. Her cheeks were flushed, not just from the physical effort, but from embarrassment. The cashier behind the register was preoccupied, with a customer who had coupons in hand, chatting loudly and laughing, completely oblivious to her exhaustion. Behind her, the line had grown, impatient shoppers shifting their weight, tapping carts, and sighing audibly. Every glance felt like judgment. Every cough or whispered conversation made her shrink a little inside. The baby yawned again and stretched toward her face, and she laughed softly, trying to mask the strain. Her smile was small and tired, a fragile thing, but her child's happy coos gave her a fleeting sense of comfort. She adjusted the straps of the stroller and shifted the grocery bag from one hand to the other, feeling a pinch in her wrist. It wasn't just physical fatigue. Her mind raced with worries about rent, bills, and the little things that never seemed to stop piling up. Every responsibility she carried felt heavier when no one was around to share the load. Then, almost imperceptibly at first, she felt it, a presence, a quiet, steady attention that didn't intrude, but didn't let her struggle go unnoticed either. The stranger who had helped with the jar earlier was still nearby, observing, waiting. He didn't say anything, didn't crowd her, didn't even try to engage in small talk. He just moved with her rhythm, almost in sync, subtle and calm. That small detail, someone noticing her, was enough to make her heart beat a little slower, to let a little breath escape her lips. She hadn't realized she was holding. A carton of milk slipped from the bag again. Her reflexes failed this time, and it rolled toward the edge of the counter. Before she could bend down, his hand appeared, steadying the bag with quiet precision. She looked up at him, startled. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking just slightly, half from relief, half from the awareness that someone was there, truly seeing her struggle. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and smiled, a calm, grounding smile that made her feel, for a fleeting second, that she wasn't alone in carrying all of this weight. Her mind drifted for a moment, remembering mornings like this before the baby arrived, when she used to feel invincible, in control. Now every day was a careful balancing act. She felt small and fragile, yet somehow determined to keep going, because the child depended on her. She wondered silently if anyone would ever notice the effort, the sleepless nights, the quiet sacrifices she made every single day. Most people didn't. They were too busy, too distracted, too caught up in their own worlds. And yet here he was, the stranger, calm, composed, observing her struggle, ready to step in at the exact right moment. There was no judgment, no pity, just an awareness that was startling in its intensity. It made her pause in the middle of her hurried steps, just for a moment, and feel the weight of someone noticing her. Not the groceries, not the baby, but her. The real her, underneath the exhaustion, under the tired smiles, under the constant pressure of a world that rarely paused for her. She tried to steady herself, adjusting the baby in her arms and shifting the heavy bags again. Her hands trembled slightly, and she bit her lip to stop herself from sighing audibly. The line behind her was growing longer, shoppers muttering impatiently, tapping their carts. She felt the familiar rush of anxiety creeping in, the fear of being judged, the fear of failing at even this simple task of grocery shopping. And then, as if sensing it, he moved closer, not too close, but just enough to create a subtle barrier between her and the growing pressure of the crowd. It wasn't obvious, but it was enough. The baby cooed, reaching toward him instinctively, sensing the calm and safety he projected. She watched, astonished, as the child's small hand extended toward the stranger and was met with a gentle, reassuring touch. In that tiny, fleeting interaction, she felt a strange sense of hope, a reminder that kindness could exist, quietly and without fanfare, even in the middle of a noisy, impatient world. Her thoughts wandered briefly. Who was he? Why did he care? It didn't matter. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to pause, to breathe, to notice that someone was on her side. Someone saw her struggle, acknowledged it without words, without fuss, without asking for anything in return. The impact was immediate. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, her grip loosened on the stroller, her steps were steadier. The presence of this stranger, calm and observant, had shifted something inside her. Even as she tried to remain composed, the question lingered in her mind: how could someone have such a quiet, powerful effect simply by noticing? It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't a grand gesture. It was a small, human, profoundly empathetic action that left her heart unexpectedly lighter. She realized in that moment that the simplest acts of awareness, just being present, could make the heaviest burdens feel just a little more bearable. Have you ever had a stranger help you when you least expected it? How did it make you feel? Share your story in the comments. It might inspire someone today. She was finally approaching the checkout, her arms strained, the baby squirming slightly and letting out tiny whimpers that tugged at her attention. Her pace slowed as the line moved in fits and starts, customers pushing carts forward, then pausing, then rushing again. Each pause felt like a small battle for control. Her control, the control over the chaos of her day. The weight of the groceries dug into her palms, and the stroller wobbled slightly with every uneven tile. She bit her lip, trying to steady herself, trying not to draw attention, trying not to fall apart. He was there, calm and steady, just a few steps behind her. His presence was quiet but unmistakable. He didn't push forward or make a scene. He didn't announce himself or draw attention. He simply observed. And yet, his observation carried power. In that crowded, noisy supermarket, his calmness created a small bubble around her, a subtle sense of protection that only she seemed to feel. He noticed everything. The way her fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the bag. The small sigh she tried to suppress when she shifted the baby to her other arm. The tension in her shoulders that hadn't relaxed in hours. The slight arch of her eyebrows. The anxious glance at the line behind her. Every detail painted a picture of exhaustion, worry, and quiet perseverance. But he didn't react immediately. He didn't rush to help, didn't speak yet. He allowed her to move, to make decisions, to navigate the small obstacles of the crowded aisle. Yet, every movement she made was accounted for in his mind, every potential hazard anticipated. It wasn't impatience, it was control, the kind that doesn't need to be announced. The kind that is obvious only in hindsight, once the intervention occurs and everything feels safer, smoother. A few shoppers noticed him out of the corner of their eyes. Some glanced briefly, wondering why he seemed so attentive to a single mom in line. Others dismissed it, assuming he was simply polite or friendly. No one realized the subtle authority he carried, the quiet energy that made the space around him feel different. But she felt it. Deep down, she felt the difference, even if she didn't understand why. He shifted slightly, aligning himself closer to her side without crowding her. It was a calculated move, a presence that reassured without intruding. He watched the baby, aware of the small movements that could turn a manageable situation into chaos. His eyes flicked briefly to the grocery bags, noting the precarious balance. He didn't grab, didn't force, didn't interfere unnecessarily. Instead, he waited, ready, prepared, patient. A sudden bump from behind caused the stroller to tilt slightly. Her instinct was to brace herself, to panic. But before she could react, he steadied it with a gentle hand, almost imperceptible, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. She looked up, startled, and for a moment their eyes met. There was no explanation, no words. Just understanding. She felt seen, acknowledged, cared for in a way that transcended speech. He scanned the surrounding area, noting the other shoppers and the line of cashiers, but never taking his eyes off the subtle struggles she faced. He anticipated every move, positioning himself at just the right distance, balancing authority with discretion. It was the kind of presence that didn't need to be loud to be powerful. His quiet control communicated safety, reliability, and competence in a way that words never could. At one point, she tried to lift a heavier bag herself, hesitating for just a fraction of a second. He didn't step in immediately. Instead, he observed her, allowing her to attempt the small act, as if giving her the dignity of independence. But the moment it became clear she might strain herself, his hand was there, steadying the bag and adjusting it gently without a word. She barely realized the intervention had happened. It felt seamless, natural, almost like a part of her own rhythm. It was in these small actions that his authority was most apparent, not in loud commands or displays, but in the way he made her feel capable, safe, and supported. Every subtle movement was deliberate, calculated to protect without overwhelming, to empower without drawing attention. This was controlled power at its finest, a presence that commanded respect and instilled calm simultaneously. Even as she tried to focus on the line, she couldn't ignore the growing sense that someone was looking out for her. The baby cooed softly, reaching toward him instinctively, sensing the calm energy he radiated. She smiled faintly, a fragile but real expression of relief. For the first time that morning, she didn't feel completely alone. Someone was aware. Someone was there. Someone she didn't even know. In that calm, deliberate observation, there was an almost imperceptible shift in the space around them. Other shoppers began to notice, though none could fully understand what they were witnessing. A man behind her in line straightened slightly, sensing the unusual calm radiating from the stranger nearby. A cashier paused momentarily, noticing the subtle but undeniable attentiveness. The presence of someone quietly in control changes the energy in a room, even if no one speaks or acts. And then came the first words, not loud, not dramatic, but calm, firm, and precise. He spoke to her just enough to acknowledge her effort, to offer support without intrusion. Take your time, he said softly, almost a whisper over the background noise. You're doing fine. Her shoulders relaxed imperceptibly. The tension in her jaw eased slightly. His words weren't a solution. They didn't carry any grand promises, but they carried recognition. And recognition, in moments like these, can feel more powerful than action. It validates effort, acknowledges struggle, and provides the tiniest sense of relief that someone else sees the fight you've been fighting alone. As the line moved forward, he continued his silent observation, ready to step in wherever necessary. But his interventions were minimal, deliberate and precise. Each act was calculated to maintain her dignity, to preserve autonomy, to show support without spectacle. This was controlled power, empathy, and strategy combined into a single, seamless presence. Would you notice subtle acts of kindness like this if you were stressed and distracted? Comment below. How do you react when someone quietly supports you? The line moved slowly, inching forward in the crowded store. Each step was deliberate, yet somehow chaotic. Shoppers shifted impatiently behind her, tapping carts, murmuring under their breath. She felt every glance, every sigh. Her arms were tired, her back stiff, and the baby in her arms squirmed again, stretching tiny hands toward the shelves. The day's exhaustion weighed on her, pressing down like a silent reminder of all the responsibilities she carried. And yet, through all this, there was him. Keanu. Observant, present. He didn't speak loudly, didn't call attention to himself, didn't make anyone else feel awkward. He simply followed at the perfect distance, a subtle but unwavering presence. Every small act, steadying the stroller, adjusting a bag, smoothing the baby's blanket, was precise, unnoticeable to most, yet monumental to her. Other shoppers began to feel it, even if they didn't understand why. There was a quiet shift in the air. Something about the way he moved, the way he carried himself, suggested authority without shouting, power without force. A woman in the line ahead glanced back, noticing the stranger who seemed to radiate calm, and then looked away, unsure what to make of it. A man leaning against a shelf whispered under his breath, "Who is that guy?" None of them could fully grasp what was happening. They just sensed the tension subtly changing. The air felt heavier around her, charged with attention, empathy, and authority, but it was invisible to those not paying close attention. She felt it too, and it made her heart pound. Her back straightened slightly, not from relief, but from the instinctual awareness that someone was on her side. Someone had noticed. For the first time in hours, maybe even days, she didn't feel invisible. She felt seen, and that tiny shift was enough to make her catch her breath, even amidst the chaos. The baby reached for a small toy that had fallen near the floor. She bent down to pick it up, feeling the familiar strain in her shoulders. Before she could adjust her balance, his hand lightly steadied the stroller again, perfectly timed, almost imperceptible. She glanced up and met his eyes for a fraction of a second, and in that instant, there was an unspoken understanding she wasn't alone. The line moved a few more steps. The cashier glanced up and noticed the baby cooing softly, the mother's slight exhaustion, and the subtle calm surrounding them. Something was different here, though the cashier couldn't quite pinpoint it. The tension in the air was contagious. A few other shoppers shifted their weight, unconsciously aware of the quiet dynamic unfolding before them. Behind her, a man in the line whispered to his friend, "Is it just me? Or is that guy watching her?" Not in a creepy way, though. It's weird. His friend shrugged but couldn't help stealing glances. The subtle social pressure began to build. Even strangers in the aisle started noticing, sensing the unusual energy around the mother and the calm, observant stranger guiding her experience without words. She noticed it too. Her pace faltered for a second, and she looked up, eyes scanning the aisle, catching subtle movements out of the corner of her eye. Was someone really paying attention to her struggle? She had spent so long feeling invisible that the thought itself was disorienting. Her heart raced, not out of fear, but anticipation. Something was about to happen. She could feel it, even if she couldn't see it yet. The air seemed to thrum with quiet tension. Every minor movement, the tilt of a grocery bag, the baby reaching for a blanket, a shopper brushing past, was amplified in her awareness. He stayed calm, watching, waiting, ready to act at the perfect moment. His presence alone was enough to make the controlling forces of exhaustion and public scrutiny falter, even if just a little. Other bystanders began to pick up on the small cracks, forming in the ordinary chaos of the store. A woman adjusting her own groceries noticed the subtle authority in his stance. A man loading a cart froze briefly, sensing something unspoken. It wasn't aggression, it wasn't confrontation. It was something more profound, awareness and controlled influence. The room was quietly shifting, and everyone around could feel it, even if they couldn't articulate it. She took a deep breath, feeling the shift in energy without understanding why. The baby giggled softly, reaching toward him instinctively, drawn to his calm presence. And in that small, fleeting moment, she realized something important someone had noticed, and that recognition alone was enough to change everything. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't flashy, but it was significant. The tension peaked quietly, in the smallest gestures, a gentle glance, a slight adjustment of a bag, a hand resting briefly on the stroller. Social pressure, observation, and awareness all converged. Everyone in the immediate vicinity, even the ones who didn't fully notice, was now part of the silent story unfolding. The stage was set for the next moment, for the payoff that would both shock and delight, leaving everyone watching, especially her, with a sense of awe and relief. This section builds tension using micro observations and social cues. Viewers feel suspense and anticipation while noticing subtle authority. It also primes the audience for the reveal. The moment had finally arrived. The line at the checkout crept forward, but everything around her seemed to slow. Her heart beat faster, not from exertion, but from anticipation she couldn't explain. She felt the quiet presence of the stranger who had been shadowing her, assisting with gentle, almost invisible interventions. His calm energy was unmistakable. Every step, every glance, every subtle gesture told her he was not just any stranger, yet she still had no idea who he really was. The baby reached for a small toy that had fallen near the stroller. She bent down, stretching a hand toward it, and in a fluid motion, he steadied the stroller. Not a word, not a fuss, just the smooth, quiet assurance that she was safe. That simple act carried more weight than anyone around could imagine. She looked up, startled once again, and their eyes met. In that instant, a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity flooded her. Then it happened. He stepped slightly closer, his movements calm and deliberate. He handed her the remaining groceries with care, adjusting the bag so that the weight felt balanced. She accepted them, still unaware of the secret that lingered behind his composed demeanor. It was only when her eyes drifted downward, catching a glimpse of a sleek card tucked into his wallet that had fallen slightly out of his pocket, that realization struck. The card bore the unmistakable logo of the very company she had applied to for months, the one she thought was unreachable. Her breath caught. The pieces began to fall into place. He wasn't just a passerby. He wasn't a kind stranger helping for no reason. The subtle confidence, the unshakable calm, the precise timing of every action, it all made sense now. This was someone who wielded influence effortlessly. Someone who could shift situations without a single dramatic gesture. The man who had quietly ensured her safety, helped her navigate the chaos, and offered her dignity in the midst of exhaustion, was the billionaire boss of the very company she had dreamed of working for. The realization hit her like a wave. She stared at him, speechless, the grocery bags nearly slipping from her tired hands. The baby gurgled happily, unaware of the adult astonishment unfolding above. She finally managed a whisper, "Wait, you're..." He simply smiled, calm, composed, not rushing to explain. There was no boast, no grand reveal, no need. His actions had already spoken louder than words ever could. It wasn't about wealth or status. It was about empathy, timing, and awareness. He had shown her that even someone with unimaginable power could act with humility and care, without making a scene or demanding recognition. Around them, the subtle tension in the store had shifted completely. Shoppers who had noticed his quiet authority now realized something extraordinary had been unfolding right before them. Some glanced at each other, silently acknowledging the unusual scenario. A few whispered in disbelief, unable to comprehend how calm, understated influence could command attention without aggression. She took a moment to collect herself, the weight of exhaustion finally mingling with a newfound sense of hope. Her shoulders relaxed slightly, her grip on the stroller eased, and for the first time in hours, maybe even days, she felt relief, pure, unspoken relief. Someone had noticed her struggle, someone had cared, and someone had acted in a way that preserved her dignity, while delivering exactly what she needed. He bent slightly to speak softly to her, his voice gentle but firm, carrying a reassurance that words alone could not fully capture. "You've done incredibly well today," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you had the support you deserved." Her eyes widened, the astonishment clear. The realization that this quiet, empathetic man, who had subtly guided her through the chaos, was not just helping her out of kindness, but also held unimaginable influence, was almost overwhelming. The grocery bags, the stroller, the baby, all the small struggles she had been juggling for so long, felt lighter now, carried in part by someone who had the power to change her life, yet chose kindness first. She could barely speak, shaking her head in disbelief.
I don't know what to say,"
she murmured. He smiled again, this time with a subtle twinkle in his eyes, the kind that suggested confidence without arrogance. "No need to say anything," he replied softly. "Just keep going. You're stronger than you think, and today someone noticed. Her gratitude bubbled over, her voice catching with emotion. Thank you, I don't know how to thank you enough. He shook his head, stepping back with the same calm, quiet authority he had maintained the entire time. You don't need to, he said. Just remember this: small acts of awareness, small kindnesses, can make a huge difference. Pass it on when you can. The baby cooed, reaching toward him instinctively, and he gently interacted, reinforcing the sense of calm and safety that had been building throughout the morning. The mother laughed softly, finally able to release some of the tension she had been carrying. Around them, the store resumed its normal rhythm, but something intangible had shifted. This wasn't just about groceries. It wasn't about a stroller or a line at checkout. It was about recognition, empathy, and timing. It was about the profound impact of noticing someone in struggle and acting with care, even if that act seems small to the rest of the world. Would you be shocked if the person quietly helping you turned out to be a billionaire? How would you react? Comment below. Would you thank them or just be speechless? This section delivers the emotional payoff: surprise, relief, and inspiration. Viewers feel satisfaction from the reveal and empathize with the mom. The billionaire twist adds curiosity and keeps engagement high, while Keanu's calm authority reinforces the story's message of subtle influence and kindness. The checkout was finally behind her. The long line, the bustling store, the relentless noise, all of it faded slightly as she stepped into the small open space near the exit. Her heart was still pounding from the mixture of exhaustion, relief, and disbelief. The baby in her arms was calm now, cooing softly, oblivious to the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. She finally allowed herself to breathe deeply, feeling the tension in her shoulders loosen for the first time in hours. Keanu stood beside her, calm as ever, a quiet presence that didn't demand attention but radiated assurance. He didn't hover, didn't instruct, didn't make any dramatic gestures. He simply existed in that moment as a reminder that someone cared, that someone had noticed, and that kindness could be delivered with dignity and respect. His subtle authority had transformed the chaos into calm, his awareness had prevented mistakes, and his gentle interventions had protected her from the small disasters that so often compounded in moments like these. She looked at him, finally able to take in the full scope of who he was, not just the stranger who had helped, but the powerful, influential figure whose actions had gone beyond mere generosity. And yet, he had chosen humility and empathy over ostentation. He hadn't announced his identity. He hadn't asked for gratitude or recognition. The revelation was powerful precisely because it was understated. The lesson was clear: true influence doesn't need a spotlight. True power doesn't demand acknowledgement. It quietly supports, protects, and uplifts. Her mind replayed the morning, the struggles she had carried alone, and the subtle interventions that had made all the difference. She thought of the grocery bags that could have toppled, the wobbly stroller, the impatient glances from strangers, and how each small act of awareness had shifted the outcome. She realized that for hours she had been surviving on instinct, strength, and perseverance, but that support, when it arrived at the perfect moment, amplified her resilience and gave her a profound sense of hope. Around them, the store returned to its usual rhythm. Shoppers resumed their errands, employees scanned items, and the hum of the fluorescent lights continued. Yet something intangible had changed. Those who had noticed the interaction carried a sense of awe, a quiet recognition that even the smallest gestures can ripple through the lives of others. And for her, the mother, the impact was immediate, tangible, and life-affirming. She adjusted the baby in her arms and looked at him one last time. Gratitude welled up in her chest, not just for the assistance with the groceries, but for the recognition of her struggles, for the demonstration that someone had truly seen her, understood her, and acted with care. Words felt inadequate. She opened her mouth to speak, then smiled softly instead, nodding in acknowledgement. Sometimes, she realized, a simple smile could carry more weight than 1,000 words. He gave a subtle nod in return, and then, with the same calm composure that had defined his presence throughout the morning, he stepped away. There was no fanfare, no announcement, no dramatic goodbye. Just the quiet exit of someone who had performed an extraordinary act without seeking applause. His actions had spoken louder than words, leaving an impression that would linger far beyond the aisles of the supermarket. As she gathered herself, the mother realized something profound. Life often felt like a series of challenges, each one small on its own but cumulatively overwhelming. And yet, even in the midst of struggle, there were moments when support could arrive unexpectedly, quietly, and without demand. These moments didn't need to be grand gestures. They didn't need to be public or celebrated. They only needed to be authentic, timely, and thoughtful. And in that authenticity, hope was born. She smiled at the baby, who reached up toward her face, tiny fingers brushing her cheek. The weight she carried, both physical and emotional, felt lighter now. Someone had not only helped her in a practical sense, but had reminded her that she was worthy of support, attention, and kindness. That knowledge would carry her through the days to come, giving her the courage to face life's challenges with renewed determination. Before stepping out of the store, she glanced around one last time. She noticed subtle shifts in the people around her, the cashier, a fellow shopper, a man stacking cans. Small expressions of awareness that suggested the world might be just a little softer, a little more attuned to the struggles of others. The impact of one person's quiet intervention had rippled outward, touching more than just her life. As she exited into the sunlight, carrying her baby and her groceries with newfound ease, she carried something even more valuable: hope, reassurance, and the knowledge that kindness, when delivered thoughtfully, could transform ordinary moments into extraordinary ones. The morning had started as a struggle, a battle against exhaustion and isolation, but it ended with empowerment, connection, and inspiration. Strength isn't about showing off power, it's about noticing those who struggle, stepping in when it matters, and lifting others quietly. Small acts of awareness can change lives more than grand gestures ever could. Have you ever experienced unexpected kindness that changed your day? Comment below and share your story. It could inspire someone today. This section closes the story emotionally, reinforcing hope and empathy. It shows practical, psychological, and emotional resolution. The moral leaves the viewer inspired, while the CTA encourages comments, shares, and audience reflection,